let's minimize that.
Hello, I'm here with Doug. That my main topic is fascism today, and it's Tuesday, October 29, 2024. And maybe I should start with that. This is what I thought was the most exciting news this week was the Washington Post, of course. I mean, the reason I subscribed to the Washington Post when Trump went in is because they are the fearless defenders of democracy, and they really have been for almost my entire life. They've released the Pentagon Papers. They were threatened to go to prison under the Nixon administration, and they refused to back down. They were the most courageous defenders of democracy against fascist government, and that ended this week. Jeff Bezos just ordered his people not to endorse Kamala Harris, which they were ready to do, of course, because it's been the raging anti-Trump newspaper all along. But he met with Trump's people, and they threatened to cut his Blue Origins contracts. They already killed his Jedi contract for Amazon to be used for the government cloud and moved to Microsoft, which he sued them over. And Trump has made it very, very clear that he practices crony capitalism and revenge. And if you speak out against him, he will punish you by crippling your company. And Jeff Bezos's large companies depend on government contracts. So he is susceptible to that pressure, and he has now done the thing which the experts on authoritarians say you should never do. He has backed down before you have to. So this is how tyrants become really powerful. People are so afraid of them, they comply in advance of instructions. So before Trump has even won the election, he's so terrified that he backs down and kneels before Trump. And so 200,000 people have canceled their Washington Post subscription. 8% of their entire subscription base is gone. Doing the same thing I did. 30% of their editorial board has resigned. And I think logically they all will as soon as they can, because this reverses the Washington Post's mission from being the defenders of democracy that stands up to government to being Pravda that just slavishly obeys government. And I expected this when Trump got in. I mentioned this on other podcasts earlier. When Trump got in, I realized we were sliding into dictatorship. And it seemed to me like one thing I read Steppenwolf as a book written by a German living in Germany in
Yeah.
the 1930s and saying, watching the world go mad around him and saying, what can I do? He can't really do anything. And there comes a time when you have to leave because they're going to start death camps and trains and they're going to close the borders. And you have to know when the water has gotten so hot, you have to jump out. So I decided early that I would do that when the New York Times turned into Pravda. And so the New York Times did endorse Kamala Harris a month ago, and they remain strong defenders of freedom and democracy, opposed to the government as necessary. The Washington Post has capitulated, which I did not see coming, but logically it is to be expected when it's no longer run by real newspaper publishers, but just as a vanity project by an oligarch.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Sam, let me interrupt you for a
yeah,
moment. There's the New York Post and the New York Times.
right. New York Post has always been far right. They're basically like Fox News.
Okay, because you stated earlier that the New York Post
No, no,
published the Pentagon Papers.
no, no, the Washington Post, not the New York
Oh,
Post.
Washington
Yeah, the
Post.
Washington Post, and they risked going to prison for it.
Wait, the New York Times published
Yeah, them
the
too.
Pentagon Papers.
I think the Washington Post did too. I know they risked their leaders were fearless. It may not have been that incident. You could be right, but they certainly had a strong history of standing up to the government, just like the New York Times, and uh,
Okay.
and that has been their brand, and that's why they had the slogan "Democracy dies in darkness." They've,
So
they,
I'm looking
yeah,
this up again, and
yeah,
you are correct
yeah,
that the Washington Post began publishing
yeah,
its own series of articles based on the Pentagon Papers.
yeah, and they were threatened. Them and the New York Times were both threatened to be thrown in prison,
Yes, yes,
and
yeah.
they stood strong against the pressure of the Nixon administration. But the
I see. My mistake, my ignorance on
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Both of them, I guess, were
yeah,
competing to publish.
yeah. They are the liberal opposition
Yeah,
to
yeah.
the
Okay,
Republican
my
administration.
mistake.
Yep, but not
Got it.
anymore. And so anyway,
Yeah.
it is an amazing reversal. And so I moved to supporting new media. Canceled my Washington Post subscription and I subscribed to the Bulwark and to Kyle Kalinski's a Patreon. These are because I think these old media things are on the way out. Everyone says very few people watch cable TV news anymore. Very few people read these newspapers anymore. It's moving into a new era where it's podcasts and Substack and independent
No,
things like that. I,
podcasts are out. It's TikTok,
well,
Facebook,
I don't
TikTok.
only for the younger generation.
Right.
I can't use TikTok. My contracting jobs forbid me to have it on my phone. Anybody that works for any kind of government agency can't have it anymore. So it's strictly only for the younger generation that doesn't have an important job yet. And but you're right. But I mean, I think I've heard I think Scott Galloway said this is going to be the first podcast election, which I think it is. You know, Trump went on Rogan. Kamala's negotiating to go on Rogan. Kamala went on some woman's podcast that reaches the most
Yeah.
women in the world called Call Me Daddy or something like that. And that's how you reach a lot of people now is with podcasts and for younger generation with things like TikTok. Not really by newspaper or television anymore.
Oh, newspaper and TV, ridiculous. Radio is silly now.
Well, they're for old people, right? So if you want, that's like Fox News, the median age is like 68, and those people are
Yeah.
staunch Republicans. So there is a lot of political power in reaching them, but not for much longer. Another 10 or 20
Yeah.
years, it'll fade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an amazing situation. What's amazing to me is that he capitulates the week before the election. You know, you could just wait a week
Yeah. Yeah.
and see
That's
if
right.
Trump wins. But even the threat that Trump might win is enough to make these guys terrified. Now, of course, if all you care about is the financial health of your organization because you're a CEO of a corporation, then you would do a risk analysis and say, well, there's a 50% chance Trump will win, so we ought to tread carefully. And what we ought to do is establish a situation where we don't see anything about politics, like McDonald's. All we do is make food. We don't talk about politics at all because that way
Yeah.
we won't be hot water either way. But the Washington Post has totally been in on politics all along.
Yeah.
That's their whole
Yeah.
brand. That's why I subscribe. That's why I'm sure a lot of people subscribe just to help support the anti-fascist movement. And so when they're now the fascists instead of the anti-fascists, I don't want to support them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, an amazing thing.
All right. Well, that's interesting. So let me tell you on the flip side, this one's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
You've heard of Whisper AI?
I think so. It's a messaging service where the hosts vanish after a while or something.
No, no, no. Whisper AI is used for transcriptions.
I don't know.
So it's being used to do speech to text. Did
Well,
I
yeah,
get
I
that
mean,
right? Yeah,
well,
speech to text.
that's been around for a long time. Maybe not this
Ye-
particular product, but I mean, Dragon Naturally Speaking had that in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. This is an older technology, but Whisper AI is now being used in medical transcriptions, and it's hallucinating like
Yeah,
crazy
yeah,
by
that's the problem.
inventing by
Yeah,
inventing diseases and
yeah,
inventing
boy.
treatments given to patients that they didn't actually receive,
Yeah, see,
and in some cases don't even actually exist.
I wouldn't jump into that market because medical lingo is so specialized and it's full of
Right.
strange words that sound like other words. If you were going to make an AI do that, you'd have to really train it on medical language, and the consequences of errors are so severe. Boy, I'm not even sure I'd recommend the current generation of LLMs even going into that field.
Well, if you look at Whisper AI, that's what the disclaimer is. But that's not stopping companies in the medical transcription world from using it.
No, and
It's being
yeah, and if you think about the AI tools police use, the problem is you can write all the disclaimers you want, but when actual people use it on the job, they will mostly just believe it and not realize its limitations. Um,
yeah, and you're right. That's another area that Whisper is being used is police work.
Man, you know, it,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember when I worked in business, I was surprised when they wanted like some financial numbers I was calculating and I wasn't sure. And I said, well, tell them this is our estimate. He said, no, I never give the customer an estimate. I never tell them something might be revised later. I just say we're not ready yet. Because when you tell them the number is 10, but that's only an estimate, they will never remember the disclaimer. They will just remember the
yeah,
number and stand back later and say, you said it was 10. So that is wise decision in dealing with real people. Don't give them some half-baked thing that doesn't really work and say, remember, it doesn't work. That's not the way to succeed. You got to finish
well,
making it so it works.
Sam, it's a different era now.
Oh, I think it's the same era it's always been. I think people have always rushed things out. Like Microsoft has many times rushed some half-baked thing out to meet the deadline. And
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean that's true in the software world.
oh, I think it's true of all kinds of products like cars and everything else. In fact, I was just reading
Hmm.
some product. Yeah, a lot of products get rushed out when they're not really ready because of other considerations, you know.
But I don't think that was the case 50, 60 years ago.
Oh, well, I guess I can't think of an immediate example, but I bet it is. I have a general feeling that the world is not worse than it used to be. All these stupid things used to happen too. Remember, they used to just make completely fake stuff like George Bonner's magic elixir that was lead and alcohol and cocaine or something.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't a defective product. That was a misleading product.
Well, I don't know. All right. Anyway, all right. Well, so
You couldn't refine it, right? You couldn't fix it post sale.
I don't know. I bet you if you tried, you could extract the cocaine from it. Anyway, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all right.
Anyway,
Well,
so Whisper AI, and I like this
yeah, yeah,
hallucinations. I can't do it right now.
yeah,
Hallucinations. There we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Is that the term you're hearing
Oh, that's
for
the term
AI?
people use for AI when
Yeah,
AI just
yeah,
makes up stuff because it is really amazing. I remember I set up a model for my workshops where I asked it about Microsoft's recall feature, and I asked the Meta AI that had only been trained up through 2023, so it would only be trained before Microsoft roll out that feature, and it will just make up a beautiful looking page completely wrong, saying recall recover makes emails you sent through Outlook come back, recall reverses the latest patches. It would just make really plausible stuff, a whole page of documentation, complete garbage. And
yeah,
if you understand how AIs work, you understand they don't have any clue about the truth. They're just doing like a curve fit through the prompt and finding what words will typically follow this prompt. So they'll make a page that looks pretty good with complete
yeah,
disregard for whether any of it is true. They don't understand how to say, I don't know. They don't even know what they don't know. They can answer any question by just drawing a line through the points and extrapolating the line, and they don't have any estimate of error bars or anything. So
yeah. Got it.
these
Got it.
hallucinations are a fundamental problem. Yeah. Anyway, so Google, about in July of this year, Google decided to do something about people stealing cookies and stored credentials like session cookies out of the browser. So they added a feature called application-bound encryption, which runs with system privileges and somehow lets each application only reach its own cookies. So hopefully other applications like injected JavaScript or something won't be able to get in. And people immediately, by September, people had figured out how to bypass it. And now a researcher has released an open source tool that bypasses it. I don't have much in the way of technical descriptions of exactly how it works, but apparently this is like a lot of other Microsoft defenses. It's really pretty weak and pretty easy to overcome. It happens many, many times at Microsoft. I remember when address space layout randomization first came out, there were only 8 bits of randomness. So it only moved your code to random 1 out of 256 values. So the simple way around it was to just run your attack 300 times, and then you'll get lucky. And almost every Microsoft defense starts this way, really, really weak, but it stops the current malware. But a small modification of the malware will get through, and then they gradually ramp it up. That might even be the
Yeah.
right way to do it. I mean, they don't want to break too many legacy applications. But anyway, this Chrome's defense has not turned out to do much good.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the Microsoft world, let's see, where are we here? I think I bumped this. So Amazon, we talked about this a couple weeks ago that Microsoft is ramping up the 3 Mile Island reactor.
Yeah, to get more
Turns
power.
out that then Amazon and Google are both following suit, and they're doing what are called SMRs, or small modular reactors.
Oh yeah,
And
I've heard of
it's
these little tiny things that the size of maybe a shipping container.
yeah, yeah, and they're providing, I don't know what, I think roughly the electricity equivalent to maybe 100,000 people in those containers, something
Something
like
like
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're able to, one, two of those are able to power AI banks of computers.
Yeah. I mean, you need a lot more power. So this is
Yeah,
logical.
yeah, yeah. It makes sense. So
Yeah.
technology isn't quite there, but they're working on it.
Yeah.
But the SMRs have been around for decades, or at least the design work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the environmentalists blocked nuclear power. My mom was a huge champion of this. It used to be believed that that was much more risky than coal or oil. We only recently came to realize it's the opposite.
Well, it was a good PR campaign, right? By
Well,
the coal industry.
oh, I suppose, but also, I mean, the nuclear power is pretty scary. That waste is a big problem. Uh, it's a fair thing. How are they going to do with that waste? Where do you really think they're going to put something that's going to last for 100,000 years?
Well, you reprocess it. That's what Europe does. They
Well,
continue to reprocess. But here's the one,
yeah,
here's the big challenge, right? We had close to 80,000 nuclear weapons.
right.
When we went to disarm them, we still have plutonium grade or weapons grade material. It deteriorates over time,
Right.
but it's still highly enriched.
Yeah.
And the figures that I've been told is based on energy needs, we have about 750 years of fuel that's already been refined.
If we reuse the weapon grade
If
stuff.
we take the weapons grade, right?
Well,
Because that's highly enriched, and we need to unenrich it, if you will,
that
to
would be
make.
nice, except everybody's just getting more and more nuclear weapons out there. I mean, you have to actually be done needing them for weapons first.
Yeah, but yeah, and yeah, and I guess the argument against this is you'd have to purify it back to weapons grade, which wouldn't be that difficult
Yeah.
compared to starting off with raw material, which
Yeah.
is what Saddam Hussein was doing.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Anyway,
And it,
nuclear is
yeah,
definitely coming back because we need the
yeah,
power, and there's no other alternative that'll make the large amounts of power we need without making the carbon situation worse.
unless you talk to the people who say, oh, solar and wind will be able to do that.
Well,
Fat
I think solar
chance.
and wind are valuable, but I don't think they can create enough quantity of power. Yeah.
They, they can't do the density.
Right. I think that's the problem.
Yeah,
Eh, So,
yeah. All right. What do you got next for us, Sam?
well, this is pretty big battle. Google has accused Microsoft of antitrust violations in their cloud computing, and Microsoft has responded by accusing Google of dishonestly funding groups secretly to make it look like industry groups and European groups are opposing Microsoft's ambitions when it's really just Google under the table funding it all. And so that seems like a big battle. And of course, I think this is overdue. I think these big companies in America absolutely need to get split up by antitrust legislation. It is ridiculous how big and important Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Apple have become. They've each become
Yeah,
dangerous monopolies. And in a rational world, we would be using antitrust legislation against them. Of course, that's impossible in America because we have no tech regulation and no hope of ever having it because their lobbyists are too powerful in Washington. But Europe is really doing it.
yeah,
And, and so I think Europe is going to be the one that pressures these companies. But now they're back to fighting among themselves, which is a questionable response. Uh, and I got
yeah.
another one here,
Okay.
which is pretty surprising. So there's a fitness app called Strava, which is apparently popular with the bodyguards of important leaders. This is some app where you can like do workouts and then show them on some public social network where you share your workouts with other people. And so they found that they can find highly confidential movements of Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, the president of France, and other people because their bodyguards are using this app. And you can just see where did their bodyguard go jogging this morning? Oh, that's which hotel they're in.
Oh,
So
so it's like the Fitbit.
I'm
The
surprised they
Fitbit.
allow this. It
Yeah,
seemed to me like it would be so obvious if you're working for a celebrity, you can't use any social networks, period. That's obviously should be the answer. I'm
yeah,
amazed they haven't figured that out. I mean, they accept diving in the way to take a bullet for you, but they won't stop using a social network. I mean, it's ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. I would agree. I
Yeah.
would agree.
Anyway.
Well, Meta
Mhm.
is in the news, laying off 100 employees.
Oh, 100. Wait, 100. They have
And
that's nothing, right? Don't they have like 100,000 employees or something?
yeah, well, yeah, but here's the news. Since 2022, Meta has laid off a quarter of their employees,
Yeah.
a
Well,
quarter of the
that's
company.
Well, I think that was Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk laid off 80% of Twitter and the company
Yeah.
survived. So every other company said, hey, we could lay off some people. We don't have to lay off 80% of them, but if he can lay off 80%, we can surely lay off like 20%.
Yeah. I wonder, do you know how Twitter is doing financially?
Oh, horrible. Oh, he paid like way too much for it. They say its value has dwindled from when he bought it, he paid 45 billion and it's really only worth 20. Now it's down to 10 and falling rapidly. Nobody will
Yeah.
advertise on it. And I think his recent move to be 100% MAGA, pushing Trump and pushing nothing but false conspiracy theories about everything. Now he forced his feed to be in everybody's feed. You're following Musk whether you like it or not. And his feed consists of the most extreme disinformation about vaccines, false claims about immigrants. Just, I think nobody advertises on it anymore. You'd have to be nuts. Your stuff is going to appear right next to pro-Nazi stuff.
So,
So,
Sam,
yeah.
this is no different than the supermarkets the tabloids when you check out that UFOs or aliens were
Well, no,
communicating with Reagan.
oh, well, no, because that was generally sort of harmless science fiction that didn't really offend people too much. This is more like the harsh, nasty stuff where you accuse people of meddling with the election and stuff and end up getting sued. There used to be a sort of a conspiracy theory wackiness that was sort of fun. Now it seems to have taken a dark turn where it's all about why you should go shoot your neighbors. People are now hunting FEMA agents in the South to shoot them, and there's talk that they'll soon be hunting election officials. They already set fire to 3 ballot boxes. We're this wacky stuff has gotten pretty dangerous and scary lately.
Yeah, so it's a, an offshoot of that, if you will, a
It's
maturation.
it's a political exploitation of it for a
Yeah,
purpose. This
okay.
is what fascists do. They make you afraid of something, just like Joseph McCarthy. There are all these communists everywhere.
Yeah.
Once you get people afraid of some scary thing, then they'll let you do anything to stamp it out.
And Sam, I can't believe it. What was the name of the newspaper? Do you remember?
Well, there used to be National Enquirer was a big
Oh,
one.
the National Enquirer. That's the one
Yeah.
I'm thinking
Yeah,
about.
that
Yeah.
was the leader of them. The Weekly
Yeah.
World News was another one. That was almost always like aliens and stuff. I guess they're still around. No, the National Enquirer is totally around. They colluded with Trump to kill all the anti-Trump articles and to purchase and kill the articles from the women that wanted to accuse him of sexual crimes. So they were actually closely allied with Trump.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, um,
I mean,
so
those were hysterical. I remember they had headlines sometimes like psychics convention canceled.
oh yeah, and always the Virgin Mary seen somewhere, and Elvis is still alive.
Elvis is
Yeah.
still alive. Yeah.
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 And that was see, this is the earlier time and a lot of people harken back to when there were only three channels on TV. There were trusted people like Walter Cronkite. So we all pretty much agreed on the basic facts of the news, and this wacky stuff was not politically significant. But now
Yeah.
we've got it's totally changed. Now, since we no longer have these mass market sources of information that we all trust, people are wandering off into like the bubbles. I remember about 10 years ago, they said Google and Facebook and everything are going to put people in a bubble where they only show you stuff that reinforces your biases. So people
Yeah.
would
Your
drift off into
beliefs.
like a fantasy land. And that is exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
people saw this coming. Nobody figured out how to stop it.
All right. What's your next story?
So you've probably heard about the McDonald's ice cream machines, right? This has been a scandal for like
Yes.
15 years. There's like you can't fix them. There's a contract that nobody can fix them except the one company that made them, and they really slow to fix them. So like 15% of them are broken at any time. Well,
And wait, it's an
yeah,
outrage with McDonald's aficionados.
people are
And
so mad.
yeah, yeah.
They
I think
made
the ice
maps
cream
so
is
you can,
crap.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
they made maps so you can find one. Anyway, so now the U.S. Copyright Office has published a new list of exemptions from the DNCA, including the McDonald's ice cream machines. So you are now allowed to hack and fix them yourself without waiting for the official people to hack to fix it. So this is a,
Really?
a blow for like the right to repair movement. So
Huh.
there would be people that figured out how to reverse engineer them and how to fix them, but they're legally prevented from doing so. But now there'll be a DMCA exception. Now, I think these DMCA exemptions only go for 3 years. So there'll be a brief
Uh,
3 year period when you can get your ice cream at McDonald's, and then the Iron Curtain will fall again, I think.
Yeah, and you had to go through the licensed McDonald's repair company, and it was backed up for weeks.
That's right.
The process to clean the machine is unbelievably complex.
Yep.
It would throw out error codes that nobody would know what it was. And it was a simple repair. Somebody reverse engineered it and said, look, we can do all the same thing in a fraction of the time and make the machines more reliable.
Yep.
Now, what I don't understand is why McDonald's Corporation, although I suspect it's all the contracts and the licensing that they had and the exclusivity
Yeah.
with the McDonald's franchise. And I believe that if a franchisee tried to use one of these alternate methods of repair, that McDonald's could cut him off as a franchisee. It
Yeah,
was
that's the problem.
termination. Yeah,
Yep. You have to
yeah,
only use the official source and nothing else. I
yeah.
remember
Interesting.
remember years ago I was at college and one of the workers there was working on their computer and she said, "This computer needs more RAM." And I said, "I could fix that for you." She said, "Oh no, I have to go through the official department and it's taking months."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Another story for us.
Yeah, so the tardigrades, these little tiny animals
Yes.
like bears, turns out that they're extremely resistant to radiation. You can hit them with 1,000 times more than it would kill a human, and they're just fine. So they're, of course, trying to figure out how that works to protect astronauts and perhaps Elon Musk on his way to Mars and stuff. Like one of the science fiction staples is you take some kind of pill and it protects you from radiation. And they're working on that. They found a bunch of 2,801 separate genes were activated when they're exposed to radiation, all having to do with DNA repair, immune responses, and cell division control. And they've tracked down a particular gene called DOTA1, which they say they inherited through horizontal gene migration from bacteria. But anyway, it only activates in response to radiation and allows them to create pigment compounds, which have to do with withstanding the radiation. So, it's interesting. There may be some sort of pill that will make you more resistant to radiation.
Hmm.
And
Well, they found that wolves in Chernobyl
yeah,
have become resistant to higher levels of radiation, that
yeah,
their genome is changed and as a protective mechanism.
yeah. It makes sense. Apparently, there are protection mechanisms available in nature if we can learn how they work and learn how to harness them.
Yeah, and just so you know, tardigrades have been found, I believe, on the outside of the space station.
Yeah, because they can withstand vacuum too, I guess. Yeah,
Yep, they can restore in the heat and the cold
yeah,
to a degree. I don't know how cold they've gone, but if you're out in the vacuum of space,
pretty
and
cool.
they can come back and they appear to be just fine.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of
And
simple organisms can do that.
yeah, there's also bacteria that has a real interesting response to radiation, in that its genome gets split up. It gets duplicated and split up. And that way, just a moment, please.
Yeah,
That way, if the DNA gets hit or modified, you have multiple copies. So when it reassembles itself, it kind of has a decision tree to know what's correct and what's been modified.
good, good. So they can respond to a event where DNA is broken. Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
I got a
okay,
couple more. Have you got any more?
okay. No, I'm out.
Okay. Well, one I got from NPR was very interesting is remembering Dr. Richard Cash. And what he did was he figured out that a whole bunch of people die from diseases like cholera and diarrhea, especially in undeveloped countries where basically their digestive system is compromised. And now when they drink water, it doesn't do them any good. And he basically invented Gatorade. He figured out that you could mix the right amount of like salts
Oh,
and sugars in the water to create something that's much easier to digest. And remember, this affected my mom. My mom had lupus, which messed up her digestive tract, and she would have the same thing. She would have fits of vomiting where she would have to go to the hospital because she'd get dehydrated until they found out about Gatorade. And even if your stomach is very upset and your bowels are not working well, you can absorb Gatorade, and it means you don't have to go to the hospital. You don't get dehydrated. So he was the guy that invented this system. But apparently, it's not easy. You have to have just the right sort of stuff mixed into the water. But he figured out what it is, and it's something you can easily manufacture for cheap and distribute in third world countries. So it saves, millions of kids that would die from these intestinal diseases. And so that's pretty awesome.
So is he still alive?
No, I think he
Or
recently died. That's why they're having an article remembering him.
I see, I
He's one of these
see.
guys with this huge accomplishment that saved millions of lives.
Yeah, so I wonder, the story I heard is a Gatorade was developed for the football team in
Yeah,
Florida.
it's a similar issue, but I think the fundamental medical principles he developed it.
Yeah, yeah, the fundamental, yeah,
What
because
is the
they
stuff
become
that if you're
dehydrated
severely
too.
dehydrated, what is the stuff that will most efficiently rehydrate you?
Yeah, yeah. And the problem that the football players had is it's terrible. You have to put in a lot of sugar. And when Pepsi
Oh,
bought it,
yeah.
they bought the licensing rights to Gatorade. They had to change the formula and just make it sweet so people could palate it.
Oh, well, that could be. I think he didn't worry about the taste, but yeah, to make it a
Yeah,
soft drink, you
yeah,
ought to worry about taste.
yeah.
Anyway,
Interesting though. Yep.
I got one
Next.
more, which is pretty
Okay.
interesting, which is Claude. Claude's had some new features. One where Claude writes JavaScript and runs it, so it can write code and run it, which is the other ones don't do, which might make it capable of answering sort of mathematical and factual questions better. But the big thing they're pushing, the big thing in AI is agents. Everything is all about agents now. Our AI agents will do a job for you. And so Claude has brought out their agent, and this means this agent can control your computer mouse and keyboard so it can do things on your computers. You can say, Claude, contact the restaurant I made a reservation for last week and move that reservation to the next week or something. And it will open your browser and do this for you, supposedly. The problem is it doesn't work. They say it makes errors like 50% of the time. And so they tried to demonstrate it, showing Claude doing some task like this. And halfway through, it just stopped and started browsing pictures of Yellowstone National Park instead of doing what it was supposed to do. And they had another one where they were making a recording. So Claude was recording, and halfway through, it just decided to turn off the recording and delete it. So that's like you're saying about your medical transcription. The problem is these AIs are just not reliable enough. And so they say, can you imagine giving this thing control of your computer? There was a guy that tried this about a month ago. He took an AI agent and put it in control of maintaining his computer. So the first thing it did was try to put on a bunch of updates and put on the wrong updates and completely destroy the operating system. So, it's what you're getting is what you might expect. Like if you have like a small child that's only half trained playing with your stuff, making lots of mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I would argue, Sam, this is equivalent to the early design of airplanes or cars,
Yeah.
where there were some really crazy designs.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll get better. I know this is the whole point of Apple's AI. Apple's
Yeah.
AI is supposed to do this for you. It's supposed to be like a butler helping you. It's not out yet. Some very early betas and limited betas are out, but supposedly later this year, the newest iPhones will have some kind of agent on there that will do things for you. And what people said is now you won't even have to have like 50 apps on your phone and remember which app to open and remember what password is for that app and everything. You'll just say to phone, buy me a car or something, and it will go plan
Yeah.
my next
Yeah.
trip for me, get a hotel and a car, and it'll know what you want for all these things and just do it right, supposedly. I could
Yeah.
use a travel agent. I'm really incompetent at travel agents. I keep getting the wrong flight and the wrong hotel and stupid things like that. It requires more attention to detail than I have. If I had an
Well,
agent that would do that right, it would be nice.
yeah. Let me tell you how confusing this is, Sam. I just took a flight
Yeah.
and I booked it from Oakland. And when I looked at the ticket, it said San Francisco Airport in Oakland. And I
What?
thought, yeah, I think that's the new name of Oakland Airport.
Oh, that's
So
that's
when I
cruel.
looked at it, I thought, wait a minute, that flight doesn't even go to San Francisco.
I know. This reminds me of that article a few years ago where the guy got on his plane trying to go to Oakland, but he ended up going to Auckland, New Zealand.
One is AUK and the other is
It
OAK.
is. So they say, you going to Oakland? Yeah, I'm going to Oakland. It sounds fun.
Um,
Yep.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I've been told that a lot of passengers headed for San Jose wind up in San Jose, Costa Rica, I think it is.
That's the problem with
Because
these
when it,
Catholic names. They're all the same. San this and San that.
yeah,
They're all just named after saints in the Bible. I've heard in Islamic countries there's a problem because there aren't very many names in the Quran. So everybody's named like Ahmed or something. There's only a small number of
yeah,
names. And where
yeah,
I grew up, they would always give you names from the Bible, and there aren't very many of them either. So Everybody's named Sam
Well,
or Joe or Mark.
yeah, I think the they're common names. There are
Yeah,
plenty of names that you wouldn't use.
I guess. But anyway, they're pretty much anyway, there was a small pool of names, and you
Yeah.
always heard the same names. That's why I know America is much more diverse than it used to be. Because when I listen to like news reports, almost all the reporters have names I can't spell or pronounce anymore. And when I was a kid, everybody had names drawn from basically the same pool of 100 names. You'd recognize everybody was Sally or Mary or Joe or Bob.
Sue, Suzanne. I can remember 30 Sues, Suzannes.
Yeah, yeah. And now
Yeah.
names are much more diverse. So clearly, a lot of people are these immigrants that I guess the regulators are getting so mad about. They're first or second or third generation immigrants with different naming conventions.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
well, that's all I've
Yeah.
got.
All right. Well, that's it for me. I've got some stories brewing that we'll talk about on Tuesday,
Sounds
which will bring us
Friday.
to,
Today's
or
Tuesday.
Friday.
We may talk about on
Tuesday. Yeah.
Friday also. Okay.
Friday. Right.
Yeah.
Which will be November.
Yeah.
And we're just over a week away from the election, aren't we?
Yes. Yes. So in a week from now, we will still have no idea who the president is, and we'll be fighting about it for not another month or two.
Yeah. Well, depends who you listen to. Some people say we don't even need an election. We already know who won.
Well, yeah, I think one of the southern states, because of the hurricane, they said we're not going to hold elections at all. We're just going to award all the electors to Donald Trump because I don't think that's going to fly, but they're trying to do that.
Well, I said that's the claim.
Yeah, well,
That's
that's
the
why I think
claim.
what'll happen is it won't be too close to call, and there'll be huge lawsuits and protests and complaints, and several states not certifying the results, and it'll just be dragging out until January, still not really knowing who won. That's probably about the most likely result.
Yeah. Hey, Sam, reminded me of one more story. Did you
Yeah.
see in Oklahoma that they decided to purchase something like 1,000 Trump Bibles?
Oh yeah, they carefully wrote them so it had to be a Bible containing like the Constitution or something. So that it's all a
Yeah.
money laundering scheme essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Interesting. So
it's a
it was a way
scam.
of getting um, um, what do you call it? Taxpayer money to
Yep,
donate to a specific campaign
that's right.
by writing a purchase contract
Yeah,
to buy a specific Bible
yep,
that contained certain content where
right.
there was only one, and
That's right.
that would have been the Trump Bible. I think that got shot down, but
Well,
I'm
I
not
hope so
positive.
because
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of things wrong with it, including separation of church and state and these other issues. But you know what's not happening? You know, Musk has been handing out $1 million a day to people who will sign up on his
Yes.
website, and he was informed that way. And Merrick Garland sent him a letter saying this violates federal election law, and he just completely ignored it and kept going. Now the state is suing him for violating state election law, but this seems to be the way it is. Merrick Garland is so worried about appearing political that he just won't do anything about anything.
Yeah. So, Sam, I listened to a lawyer on YouTube discuss this,
Yeah,
and it's interesting about the election law fraud. If I'm going to put it into that category or buying votes,
yeah.
and that's probably it's not fraud per se,
No,
but
it's election. It's a violation of the
tampering.
election rules.
Yeah.
But I think the FEC has been paralyzed for a long time, so I think
And
yeah,
yeah, and the question is really what he doing illegal? And there's several variations of what he's doing. The $1 million giveaway
yeah,
and more money in Pennsylvania. So it's at a federal level and on a state level.
yeah.
So there'd have to be multiple lawsuits from the 50 states as well as federal. But the interesting part is the most he could get convicted for at the federal level is less than 2 years.
Oh, well, even so, I think that would annoy him. But anyway, I
Yeah,
don't think,
yeah, but
but I mean, that's the thing that's been made nakedly clear is that if you're rich and powerful, the law doesn't apply to you. Musk and Trump
exactly.
just ride right over the law and nothing happens. And I guess it's always been that way. But a lot of us imagined that it was different in America, but doesn't seem to
It's
be.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think
And
that's the big lesson of the whole Trump era is that all the stuff we thought made America so different and exceptional is not really that true.
yeah, Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's what my point
Yeah.
is if you or I tried to buy votes,
Oh, yeah.
we we'd be we'd
We'd
be
be
there
locked
with
up.
Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no, but if you're rich and powerful, you can afford a lot of good lawyers, then you can fight back effectively forever. That was Roy Cohn's system. You can just break the law and just with endless obfuscation and delay,
Yeah.
just drag it off forever. That's what Trump learned, how to just
Yeah.
completely ignore the laws.
Yeah. And yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
That's true. All
Yeah.
right, that's
All
it
right.
for me.
Yep. Okay. That's the end of this one.